Welcome back to the program. Lou and Michelle here, being joined by Michael Swanger. He's from the Iowa History Journal. This is a publication. If you haven't picked this thing up, folks, what in the world's your problem? Because this is one of the greatest publications that the state of Iowa has. And Michael, tell everybody.
This one smells like it's hot off the presses,
It feels like it's hot off the press. Tell everybody how often this magazine comes out.
6 times a year. Love the smell of fresh ink and paper.
It's
It's great,
right,
isn't it?
that's
That's right. I know. It smells like victory.
All right,
So.
it does smell like victory. And speaking of victory, on the cover, we have a most interesting photo. Tell us about the cover.
We do. We're writing about the centennial of the armistice of World War I, and on the cover is a photo of Lawrence DeBauer, who was a 23-year-old soldier from Allison, who was among the thousands of Iowans who entered U.S. Army at Camp Dodge. That photo was courtesy of our friends, our mutual friends of the Iowa Gold Star Military Museum.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we asked them to dig up some photos for us that we used for our story. So we had several interesting photos to choose from. The problem was finding, room for all of them or which ones to use. We thought that was just a great photo for the cover. It kind of told the story of everything was happening in Iowa's role in the war, in the Great War. We had almost 115,000 Iowans serve in World War I, a little over 3,500 casualties from the war. One of the more famous photos from Iowa's involvement in the war was the human Statue of Liberty.
The human Statue of Liberty, which people around the world know about this, as you mentioned.
It did, that's right. And we ran a full-page version of that picture, and there it is, as you see on your screen. It's there were 18,000 officers and men positioned in the shape of the Statue of Liberty at Camp Dodge. This was shot in July of 1918, I believe. And of the 18,000 people who lined up for this photo, and they used thousands of yards of white tape to outline the image, 12,000 are just in the torch.
In the torch alone?
The torch, just to kind of give you perspective of how many
Page
people
15 of your hymnal, Michelle.
That's right.
Okay, do you want to go?
That's right.
Because we're following along with the copies of the Iowa History Journal,
Right.
which is something you can do if you have it in your hands. But
That's right.
It really puts things in perspective of how massive a project this was. And again,
really was.
this is without having drones to position everybody.
That's
okay?
right, or Photoshop
Yeah.
or anything. Right. You had to line folks up. I'd like to know more about it, to be honest with you. I think there's another story there in terms of finding out how much was involved to shoot that photo. I know it was a camera crew out of Chicago, I believe, that they brought in to take the picture, but it was just one of the more striking images from the war. And of course, Iowa's role in it. I know that we're a little past Veterans Day in terms of, it began as Armistice Day, and that morphed into Veterans Day.
Right.
When President Wilson declared it a year after the war had ended. So Iowa played a huge role in that war, as it has in other wars too. And we wanted to go over all those important things, including a lot of folks know that Merle Hay, for example,
the guy who built the mall, right?
The guy who built the mall,
yeah,
that's
right.
right. And the road too. I believe he paved the road.
He had the road that went to the mall. No, but the history behind Merle Hay is
that he was one of the first three U.S. casualties during the war. He was killed on November 3rd, 1917, and there's a picture of his funeral. This is a rare photo, actually, from his funeral in Glidden, Iowa, where he's from. When he was killed overseas at the beginning of the war, he was buried in France, and this is his funeral in 1921.
Seriously?
They returned the body to Iowa and buried him in his hometown of Glidden. So that's a rare photo from that ceremony, actually.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And you have these inside of Iowa History Journal.
We do, those photos and others.
And there's others too, yeah.
There are others. We didn't have room for all of them. We like to run some of them on our Facebook page. We have a weekly quiz, and we used another photo from Merle Hay's funeral a couple of weeks back from his burial in France, and that was a rare find as well. So that's part of the fun of the job, is finding those pictures and unearthing them and sharing them with everyone. So
so we're talking about anniversaries that are pretty special, and we have a couple of 100-year anniversaries going on here around Central Iowa.
We do. The Des Moines Playhouse is about to embark on its 100th year. It began, there's a photo of the Playhouse when it moved into the old Roosevelt movie theater in I think it was 1953. I'd have to go back and double check that. But it was John Busby, our mutual friend John.
But he built the place?
He built it, that's right. That's right. Okay. That's right. Well, he is a man about town, isn't he? He's everywhere. Yeah. But he wrote the story for us because obviously theater is close to his heart and in his wheelhouse. And he did a nice job of putting his arms around a big story of trying to encapsulate 100 years of the Des Moines Theater, of the Des Moines Playhouse, excuse me. And so we have lots of old photos. There's a nice shot of Cloris Leachman, one of the most famous alumni of the theater.
And it's kind of interesting to look at the productions that have taken place over, I mean, when you're talking 100-year span, all of the different productions that have been done there.
That's right. They do an amazing job. And of course, what they did with children's theater, that was kind of groundbreaking, and how it started in 1919 from the whole Little Theater movement that began in Europe and made its way to the U.S., the East Coast, and eventually hit Des Moines. And that's how really, that was the impetus for the Playhouse.
How about that? So
and you can't, because you don't think about the history behind some of these things. You know, we go to the Playhouse, but there's, and then that's something, so you guys have done a beautiful job of capturing that and giving us, you know, and then now when we go, it's like, whoa, you even have more of that to pull from.
Exactly. And I know they do a nice job preserving history there. They have quite an archive, and they've been kind enough to share some photos. And again, some of those pictures are in our story. I know that Leanne has a nice treasure trove over there.
Leanne Bakeros,
Exactly. So, but yeah, they really value their history, as they should, because it's important. And they've launched the careers of a lot of actors and actresses. So,
Nice. Another article that is in there that's getting all kinds of attention. A guy by the name of Alvin Roy Morrison of Marshalltown.
Right.
Now, why is that such a prominent name? Why is that such a special name?
Well, later he was known as Allie, and Allie became the golden boy of the 1928 Olympics. He was the first Iowa wrestler to win a gold medal.
How about that?
Exactly.
In Iowa, that is the ultimate.
Exactly. And a lot of people, when you think about, there's a nice portrait of him from those games. When you think about wrestling in Iowa and its rich history and its tradition, everyone thinks about other names of folks who might have won it first. But we have to go all the way back to 1928, the games in Amsterdam, where he won the gold. He went on to wrestle in college at the University of Illinois, and then he also became a coach in Illinois and across the Midwest, and I think he ended his career in Omaha. But what's really neat about this story, and what gives us some context in terms of today, is that in the next probably week or two, and I have to check back with them on this, but it's anticipated that they're going to debut a wrestling training room at his alma mater, Marshalltown High School.
Oh, really?
In his name. So they're going to name it after him.
Nice.
Wow.
And that's supposed to come up probably, they said sometime in early December. So I need to put a call back in there and find out exactly when it's going to take place, because that'll be a nice event. I know that Dan Gable was a fan, is interested in his story. I'm sure he'll be there for the ceremony. So it'll be a big deal for Marshalltown, and a nice uplifting story considering everything they've been going through since the summer. So I'm looking forward to that as well. But he was a legend in wrestling, and this is before the Hawkeyes had a huge program, before the Cyclones.
Before Gable was a legend, he was a legend.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is BG, Iowa BG, before Gable.
Before Gable, that's right. I think everything should be referenced that way, before or after. You're right.
When was this? Was it BG? Yeah, it was BG, and this is the guy that was responsible.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the photos in that story, too, is a reader was kind enough to submit, they picked up the copy of his high school yearbook, and I had never seen that photo of Allie before, and so we scanned it and ran it in the magazine. So it was a really nice piece. And the Dan Gable Museum up in Waterloo, they were kind enough to lend us some photos as well, because they have a nice archive as well. So.
Okay, you talked about names in here too, and real quick, I also saw in here, if I'm not mistaken, what's in a name? Altoona.
Altoona, 150 years. We had a slew of cities turn 150 years old this year. We couldn't get to all of them. We're going to try to get to more of them next year. And we want to talk about their history. And like so many towns in central Iowa, well, Iowa in general, but especially here, it was based around the railroad. And of course, the history tied in with trains. So we wanted to touch base on Altoona and talk about that, because everyone thinks about all the new things that have happened there, but they really do have a long and deep history. So we wanted to delve into that a little bit.
All right.
Now, how do people go about can you pick these up at the bookstores, get a subscription online? Tell us how, everybody's going to want to get an issue of this and, regularly throughout the year.
Sure. We're sold at Casey's and Hy-Vee. Locally here, we're at Beaverdale Books. The best way to get us is online at iowahistoryjournal.com. And if I can add this real quick, we just launched our first ever sale of our collectible back issues on Small Business Saturday. A lot of folks say that they have sales on things all the time. and that's usually the case, but we have never done this before.
Okay.
We've never ran a sale on our back issues, and folks who have been longtime readers of the magazine, we just wrapped up, this is the conclusion of our 10th year, collect the magazine because the stories are timeless, they have a long shelf life, and our first 2 years are sold out, and we really have cut the prices on our back issues as a thank you to all of our loyal readers over the years, because we want them to fill in their collections. Not only do they keep it, a lot of times they pass it on to their kids or their grandkids and they use them. And this magazine's being used in schools as well, in middle schools and high schools to help teach Iowa history.
You know what this reminds me of, and you mentioned that about collecting the magazines. When people start talking about this, just remember back, you know, we mentioned back in the day, like Popular Science. You got Popular Science magazines and you hung on to them because you could always go back and reference them.
Exactly.
And that's what this is becoming now, is people hanging on to this like those classic magazines.
Right. Knowledge never goes out of style.
Right.
I mean, once you've learned something, or if you haven't learned it, that it's there for you to pick up and read. So
passing along.
We're trying to do that, through the month of December and through January as a thank you to our readers. And I'm hoping that they take advantage of it and fill in their back issues, their collections. So.
Wonderful. And who doesn't love Iowa history?
Right.
Whole journal full of it right here, folks. So you can check that out online. Again, online, how do you find it?
IowaHistoryJournal.com.
That works. Wonderful. Michael,
Appreciate
good to see
it.
you again.
Thank you.
As always.
Thank you.